Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is James Williamson. I'm the chair of the Outreach and Education Committee. Today, we're going to be doing TARO 2.0 remediation training. This is sort of a check-in, kind of how the remediation process is going, and an opportunity for everyone to ask questions, discuss any kind of issues they may be having, kind of pool the collective knowledge of the TARO universe to try to address a lot of different issues, some small, some big. So thank you for joining us. So let's go ahead and get started. So I just wanted to give you kind of a refresher of where we are on the TARO 2.0 schedule. So right now we've had the soft launch of the administrative site. That information was sent out on the TARO listserv. If you haven't had a chance to look at the administrative site, this is your chance to do so. Carla Alvarez is getting feedback from that. So if you haven't had a chance, please go in, poke around, and provide some feedback. I know the usability ad hoc group is doing testing for that as well. But if you're not a part of that group, we still want your feedback. So, and then in a couple of weeks, we'll have the soft launch of the public site. So July 13th for the public site. And then we'll have usability testing through August. And then September 1st will be the freeze date, the deadline to kind of stop uploading to the old TARO site and begin the final migration to the new TARO site. And then hard launch September 28th, 2021. Exciting. So we just got to make it through the summer. Okay, and throughout the summer, we're going to be doing more training sessions. So right now, the plan is to do a session on subject access and quality control in July, submitting finding aids to TARO 2.0, July, August, especially after we get the feedback for the administrative side of TARO 2.0. A possibility of an ArchivesSpace training session in July, August. Then we'll do a TARO status report August, September, and then kind of fall 2021 kind of tutorials for actual public use of the TARO site. Right now, the plan is to start back with in-person trainings later in the year. So we've received funds from the State Records Advisory Board for 3 in-person trainings over the next year. So the first will be in San Antonio in December of this year. And then there will be sessions in the DFW area in early 2021, and then and then at SSA in Houston in May of 2022. I'm sorry, I said DFW in early 2021. That's already passed. DFW in early 2022, Houston in May 2022, and then funding for 3 more in-person sessions or in-person trainings after that in different other parts of the area of Texas. So if you are interested in hosting any of these in-person sessions, please contact Amy Bowman and Amanda Foki. Their information will be at the end. Their contact information will be at the end of the slides. And send them an email if you're interested in hosting. I know they would greatly appreciate it. So that's the kind of training calendar for this year. So, big, exciting summer into fall. So we'll talk about, so here's the schedule for today. We're going to do some kind of presenting on things at the beginning, kind of going over the basics, and then kind of talking about the experiences that the remediation ad hoc group has had in this kind of process. But the presentations aren't kind of the main focus there. You know, we really want this to be an open forum for discussions about remediation. If you're having any sort of issues and you're just not able to kind of overcome them, or you can't figure out what's wrong, you know, this is a chance to ask questions and see if we can find an answer to your problem. So this is the schedule for today. We'll go over the kind of the status update of the remediation process and then dive into questions in an open forum. So I please encourage you to ask questions in the chat or unmute yourselves and ask questions. So I'm gonna toss it over to Samantha Dodd, who's the co-chair of the ad hoc remediation group.
Hi, good morning, everybody. It's nice to see some people. I know you're probably sick of seeing all my emails that I keep sending out, but I appreciate all of the hard work that you guys are doing to help us make this TARO 2.0 such a better version of what we've got now. For those of you who are either just getting started with remediation or haven't had a chance yet to dive into this, we'll just kind of do a little overview on what it is and why we have to work on our files right now. Basically, with the new site, the developers took our best practice guide and based the new design off those required elements, and some of our finding aids are much older. We've all gone through changes, standards have updated, so we just have to edit those files to make sure they're going to function and migrate over to the new site. So it's pretty much just the nature of data migration in general. We're also considering the bigger projects that are out there. NAFON, if you're not aware, is the National Finding Aid Network project that's currently being investigated. So we want to make sure that the work we're doing for TARO 2.0 will also work then for the National Finding Aid project, should we keep being involved with that kind of program. The requirements for this new site functionalities were all laid out in the planning and implementation grant. So we're making sure we're meeting those commitments for our grant. And with all of these elements that we're adding, we're making sure everyone's got the same required pieces so that we don't kind of create any inequity on the new site, that everybody's materials are discoverable when people are looking for resources on TARO 2.0. And again, this sort of migration prep is counting for part of the cost share for the NEH grant that we're working on right now. James, slide. So compliance, each month, you guys are getting an email from me that'll contain basically 2 files for every institution. One is kind of a general overview of all of your finding aids, and it'll tell you how many pass compliance currently, and it'll tell you based on each of these elements, what types of errors you have most of and warnings. And then you'll get a separate report, which breaks it down by finding aid and lists all of the errors and the warnings per finding aid. So what does that mean? Basically, when you upload a finding aid to the qual site or to this new admin site to check it for validation, it's going to first look at the EAD schema, make sure all of your elements are valid. Then it's going to check for the required elements to make sure you have those. If you're missing an element that's required, it's going to appear as an error, and it's going to be in bright red at the top. Once you've taken care of those errors, then you will see just a list of what are called warnings. These are just preferred elements. They're not required. You don't have to add these materials if it's not relevant to the collection of finding aid. These are, again, it's just a preferred thing. And so they will not affect your finding aid migrating to the new site. Only the errors will. If the finding aid still has errors, those need to be addressed before they will be able to migrate over to the new website. So you will get, as every month again, as soon as we get the error reports, we'll send those back out to you guys so that you can see kind of the status of where you are and how many more we still got to get through. And so I'll turn this back over to James so you can talk about the resources for remediating those files.
Yeah, so we have a couple of resources that are there to assist in the process. So there's a resources library on the TARO Today site. There's a link to it here. which kind of compiles all the documentation that we've created so far. But there is a new best practices guide. If you do not have that, you can. There's a zip file, and you can download with the best practices guide, as well as updated examples and a new template that fits into compliance. There's also the guide to remediation. We put this out in February or March. It's been updated since. If you have not downloaded the most recent edition of the guide to my remediation, go ahead and download that. There were some changes, so some big changes. So make sure you have a new version of that. And then just the new TARO 2.0 documentation that's coming out of the designer group. They provided documentation for the admin site. Obviously, some of that's going to change based off feedback, but the major structures and things like that won't. And then once the feedback comes in, we'll update the documentation and then add that to the resource library and create some tutorials based on that admin documentation. But the kind of beginning documentation is there for you to use and kind of get a sense and feel of how TARO 2.0 is going to work. And then obviously, once again, if you're looking at the administrative site and then on the public site for the soft launch, send your feedback to Carla. All feedback is greatly appreciated. Oop. Somehow I clicked on the guide to migration and I didn't mean to. Okay. Okay. Oh, I didn't want it to share that. There we go. Sorry about that. The biggest resource is the data remediation committee itself. They've developed a buddy system to assist with correcting errors and getting finding aids into compliance. These are the members of the buddy system. Everybody should have a buddy assigned. Summerly grant people don't need those because they're already being reviewed and are using updated templates. But if you do not have a buddy for any reason, please feel free to contact Robert Weaver and Samantha Dodd, and they can assist in assigning you a buddy. It's never too late. But they'll help you with understanding error reports and helping you trying to find solutions for bringing your finding aids into compliance. There's also an ArchivesSpace users working group. You can contact Rebecca Romanchuk if you're not a part of that. And then we've had assistance from THRAB with grant funding to provide hands-on assistance for finding aid remediation. So I'll toss back over to Samantha for a status update.
Awesome. If you'll go to the next slide. So we are definitely making headway. And again, thank you to everybody here now and everybody in the TARO community who's been working hard on this. We know it's a lot of work and a lot of files, but we are getting there. So as you can see, we're not only increasing TARO finding aids that are compliant, but we're still adding new members. So now TARO comprises 71 member institutions. We're still adding new Summerly members. So welcome to all our new members to TARO. So far, we've got 53 of our repositories who've started or completely finished, or at 75% participation with remediation. We've got 5,392 already ready to migrate to the new site out of a total of 15,321. I expect our July report will be even higher because we have this grant-funded remediator, Sarah, who's been helping out a number of repositories. So far, she's already helped 16 different repositories and remediated 868 files herself. So we're so excited to have her on board and to offer that additional support to you guys. So if you are needing some further help, you just can't get to remediation, you just don't have time, or you've got staff turnover or hours changed and things like that, there's still time for us to provide this additional assistance. Please just send me an email and we will get that set up for you. So I'm actually going to turn this now over to Sarah, who's going to talk about her work and what she's kind of seen in remediating a bunch of different repositories' work.
Thank you, Samantha. If you can go to the next slide, please. So as she mentioned, I've been doing a bunch of different repositories, and I've been noticing some very common issues that basically everyone's been having. All of these examples before you came from UT Arlington, there we go. Just because that's the one I happened to be looking at the time when I was working on it. There's like 7 main issues that exist in like 4 sections, and they're really easy to go through generally. 3 issues tend to happen in unit date. You'll see on the second line in this unit date example, there's the era, the calendar, and the normal attributes. Those are often missing on people's unit dates for their finding aids. Era and calendar will always say those exact things. So you can copy paste that into your finding aid and it will work perfectly. The normal needs to match whatever the date is you have listed. A common thing I've noticed is if you don't have a date for the finding aid, you'll write undated or in.d for no date. And people sometimes seem to think that a normal doesn't exist for that. Normal for undated is just 0000/0000. It's a very bog standard open number for it. Unit ID is another issue I tend to notice. A lot of finding aids don't have the country code or the repository code. Country code will always be US. The repository code is the code assigned to your repository. There is up at near the top section of the finding aid, there is a main agency code. And the main agency code is your repository code. Those 2 things need to match. So if you don't know what the repository code is, you can contact Robert or Samantha. They can figure that out for you very quickly. If you have your main agency code, just put that as your repository code and life should be good. There have been instances where we've had capitalization errors because capitalization is important on this one. TARO seems to lean more in the have everything be lowercase just for consistency. So that might be an issue you're running into. An issue that Amanda Foki had with her rice finding aids is listed here as well in the physical description. A requirement is now that inside of the physical description tag, there needs to be the extent tag. And this is true for every single physical description listed in the finding aid. You can have 1, you can have 7. Every single one needs to have an extent tag inside of it, wrapping around whatever the actual words are. And otherwise, it will throw a red error and you won't be able to validate. Yeah, just try and make sure every single one of them has that, you're good. When it comes to person names, corporation names, subject, and geography names, these will appear in the origination tag up in the physical description, and they'll also appear down in the control access section, which I am aware is its own kettle of fish that needs to be dealt with. But in general, every single person name, corp name, subject, and geography name needs to have an encoding analog and needs to have a source. If you don't know what the source is, local is perfect. And if you want to try and go through Library of Congress and find all the appropriate information, that's cool. If you don't have the time for that, local will save you a bunch of time. And if you don't know what the encoding analog is, that's okay, because the qual site will be able to tell you what it needs. Put in a guess, make sure everything else is fine, put it to the qual site to check, and it will say, oh, the person name in origination needs to be 100. And you look and it says like 110 instead. Just change the 110 to the 100, boom, it works, you're fine. The qual site is a wonderful checking tool. It will tell you what codes you need to change, and in some instances, will tell you exactly what it needs to be changed to. So just go slowly, go carefully, and go thoroughly, and you should be pretty good, honestly. And that's really all I have. I could go on for like an hour and a half on all of the changes, but these are the major common ones you'll find. I believe that the slides will be available after the meeting. So if you need to refer back to them, then feel free to look at this. These are all perfectly validated examples. All of these work appropriately. So just replace whatever information you need with your information, and you should be good to go. And I will pass it over to Amanda now for the common issues found in ArchivesSpace.
Okay. I know not everyone is an ArchivesSpace user, so we'll keep this brief, but so we use ArchivesSpace here at Rice University, and we do configure some of the settings in ArchivesSpace, such as for EAD, like ID. We're able to put in our repository code, like Sarah was just talking about, some other high-level information that all our finding aids share, like that. But when we export our XML from ArchivesSpace, it doesn't come out in a fully TARO 2.0 compliant way. So for example, the encoding analog attributes are not set. So that's a really important compliance factor for TARO. It also doesn't group our control access headings, all our subject headings, the way they're supposed to be grouped for TARO 2.0 compliance. And it just lumps them all together, no matter if they're for a genre or a personal name. Or so it's a little messy the way it gets exported from ArchivesSpace. So we need a way to be able to clean that up before we send it to TARO for compliance checking. Let's see. If you want to go to the next slide, please, James. So we have a few tools, and I want to thank Rebecca Romanchuk from the Texas State Library and Archives, because she heads the group that helps the ArchivesSpace repositories around the state. And she put this information together to share. She's been working with those repositories, so they already know about these tools. But in case you're thinking of using ArchivesSpace and you're curious how it would work with TARO, you can join that group. And here's some basic info. Basically, there has to be some post-export cleanup of the XML when it comes out of ArchivesSpace. And the Briscoe Center has some tools that were developed by Olivia, who is here on the call with us. And so I don't know if she wants to pipe up for a moment and say just a short thing about how their tools work. Do you want to do that, Olivia?
Sure, that's fine. So what I have included in that folder, we have a bunch of scripts that we use to batch make corrections that were some of the common errors we had in our remediation. So we were missing some required notes. So we could write them up in a spreadsheet and use the API to batch post them to some of our records. So that was a faster way to do some of the changes. And those are API calls. You structure the data in OpenRefine and you can export them. We also have a custom exporter that our system archivist, Nate, developed based on, I believe, the Bentley Historical Library's EAD exporter, and it actually fixes some things that you had mentioned. It exports the encoding analog attributes, for example, and it organizes the subjects the way TARO wants them. It does a few other things. It puts anything that's in a physical description is just a general note you can apply to everything. To satisfy TARO, it puts everything in a physical description note in an extent tag. So things like that. Yeah, and a lot more.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you speaking when you didn't have any notice that you were going to speak about your tools. And then here at Rice, we have a script also. It's a Python script. And the way we work with it is a little bit different. We export our XML from ArchivesSpace. We run this script on it, and it makes the changes that we need. And then we're able to use the compliance checker on that file, the TARO compliance checker, and upload it from there. So it's been pretty straightforward for us. And then the Texas State Library and Archives is using tools, as the slide says, to manipulate data. And then it's going into their ArchivesSpace. So they're working with ArchivesSpace a little bit differently. So people have developed some tools and workflows that work for their specific situation. So you have some buddies around the state using ArchivesSpace that could share more information with you about that if you have questions. And then as James was pointing out, we're going to have a training coming up that's specific to ArchivesSpace. So that's the basic info on ArchivesSpace.
Thank you, Amanda. So now is kind of the time to move into the open forum. We want to hear kind of your questions, or if there's just something you would like to discuss. If you have maybe some questions for Sarah, we've got time if you want to talk about more issues that you have seen. So this is just kind of we'll let the discussion lead us where it wants to go. So, so please unmute yourselves, or you can drop your chats in the question. Or you can drop your questions in the chat as well if you want to.
I see Christy has a question for Sam.
So the monthly error reports are helpful. Can you talk through which warnings are possibly more helpful to focus on? Like, are there elements in there that will do more heavy lifting than others on TARO 2.0? I do know that there are certain higher level errors that you'll need to fix before. Sometimes you all may have seen it where you fix an error and then you resubmit the finding aid and then you get a whole new set of errors. And it's because there are some higher level elements that need to happen first before you can get the rest of the lower level elements. And if there's somebody on our ad hoc team who can speak to that a little more clearly than I can, but that is my understanding, that there are just certain top level elements that we have to fix first before the rest of your warnings or errors will appear on that report.
This is Robert, chair of TARO. I have to speak a little softly. I'm in my reference area right now. I apologize. So Christy, to answer your question in a different way, the structure for the errors and the warnings was based around the best practice guide at the time, which identified elements that were required, which are the same ones that are showing up red on the qual site, and then elements that were not required. And there were a bunch of different words to describe them. You know, not mandatory. The verbiage was all over the place, but the upshot of it is that they use the best practice guide as the guideline to separate these things into warnings and required fixes. Therefore, the warnings aren't things that are really going to be used. I don't want to say that. They're things that we need to be present for perhaps future changes or for maybe some of the bells and whistles, but generally the bulk of searching, for example, within the site is going to be done by creator, title, date, a couple of other things like that, as well as subject headings, which is why those encoding analogs, right, and sources need to be correct on subject headings as well. So don't know if that fully answers your questions, but in the main, if no one else gets anything, or if no one gets anything else from what I'm saying, the warnings aren't really something to be concerned about. They're more tagged information on the back end that perhaps may facilitate some sort of Google indexing searching, if that's something they do, or may be useful as I think out loud for when we make sure that all these appear on Archive Grid, if there's any thing that needs to go there. They're also useful if your catalogers need this information, you know, as you pass these things off to them to catalog the collection, or if you do it yourself. Of course, that's an internal process. You're probably already doing that anyway, but that's a long-winded way of saying that warnings really aren't doing anything right now. They are more of a help for all of us to have that additional data. And so I just looked at at your most recent error report. And so some of the warnings you're getting are for sponsor and alt format available, separated material and things like that everybody's getting, because very few of us have those in our finding aids. Some of yours, however, don't have related material. That's always a warning because it's not required. But as we all know, if you can list related finding aids in one of your finding aids, that helps our patrons better find stuff. TARO doesn't care about that, but we really hope that you can put that in there, and we remind you that that's the thing that can be in the finding aid. So I'll back off right now. I know there's some other questions in chat.
Amy Bowman asked me, Olivia Solis at the Briscoe Center, a question about our progress. And just to inform all of you guys, we're doing our remediation maybe a little bit differently than some groups, because we're doing it outside of, we're doing them in ArchivesSpace, and then we're going to use a batch exporter to batch export our 4,000 plus finding aids. And I talked to, we spent the last 6 months doing our cleanup, and we're pretty much ready to go. I think we're going to batch export next week. I communicated with Minnie and JJ about what's appropriate to post, and we're going to start out with about 500 a week, but see what we can do. So that's us. One thing about the batch exporter I discovered that we're using, which I believe is a Duke script, is that you have to have publish all checked, or else some required fields that you've spent 6 months cleaning, like abstract, won't actually export. So that's also an API call you can do. But that's where we are.
Thank you, Olivia. And I see from Sandra, if there's anyone out there who's using the ATOM TARO XML style sheet, she's happy to share that once it's ready. Christy chimed in. Yes, I was the same way when we finished remediating the files here at SMU, that I wanted to get rid of all of the warnings so that everything just showed up perfectly, but just everyone's getting those same warnings. Again, just keep in mind it's a preferred element type thing. It's not required for compliance or for any of your finding aids.
And Sandra, I know the only repository we identified that's definitely using ATOM is Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Cushing Library, yeah. And so if you've already talked to them, awesome. Otherwise, we could reach out to them.
But yeah.
Well, if it's okay with you, we'll let them know. We actually remediated their files because they're juggling a lot of stuff right now. So they're probably going to have to do some re-importing and whatnot, and your help would probably be of tremendous use for them. So you want me to let them know?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll touch base with them again when it's ready, but yeah, just give them a heads up.
Absolutely.
And if it's okay, I would love to just share that with the wider TARO community, just the resources library.
Yeah, definitely. I'll contact you when it's ready.
It helped me a lot to be able to ask Sarah for her help on remediating some of our files. You know, at Rice, we've worked through a lot of our files ourselves, but we're coming up on the soft launch of the site, you know, on the public side, and we want as many of our finding aids visible in that soft launch as possible. And so we're really working to try to get our last ones in. We have like 90 left to go through. And so it was a big help to be able to ask Sarah for help on some of the ones, and makes me feel better too to see that she's saying in the chat that everybody has warnings.
And just a reminder to everyone, now that we've got the admin site up, and when we launch the soft site, that you can continue checking finding aids against those and uploading to the new site, but to be sure to also upload any remediated files to the FTP site, because that soft launch site will disappear when they're going to launch the official site. So any changes we've done in there, that's all going to get cleared out, and they're going to migrate from the FTP site. So just make sure you can test the admin site, uploading finding aids and check them. That's great. Just make sure you're also putting it on FTP so that it actually migrates over once we get the real site up and ready.
And also, I don't want to veer too much into the, you know, the front-facing site, because we're all excited about that, but it's a little much to handle mentally right now. When we are testing the front end site, we'll still be able to test the admin site. And one thing that TARO is hoping, well, one thing that they must accomplish is to make sure that when your finding aids upload, they appear on that front end site in real time. So if you are in the midst of this process and want to play around with that when that new site comes up, or if you want to do some searching with the elements that, like Christy said, that she's not going to put in these finding aids, or rather has as warnings, or the elements that have been added to make sure that they're doing what they said, we'd really appreciate that help as well. As everyone's getting so familiar with all this as a part of remediation, that the insights or sort of non-lateral ways of thinking about testing these finding aids as this stuff happens is going to be really useful. So, you know, big picture, it doesn't stop with remediation. What you're learning here, apply it to make the site work better too.
Robert or Samantha, how much longer how long is the funding for Sarah? Is there an end date, just so everybody knows that end of the month? Okay.
Yeah, so we've got a couple weeks left, but like I said, Sarah's done some incredible work and is flying through these now. And because she's done so many and seen the error so many times, that she still has time, so we can still take more repositories and finding aids. If you want her to do just part of yours, just email me a list of numbers. We'll get those files to her, and we'll help get your foot in the door. That way, at least on the new site, you have something up and ready to test on the new site.
And I'll also say that Sarah's legacy will carry on past June 30th, as she is putting together the type of thing that you already saw today about how to fix these finding aids, but also tools that she's used or tips that she's come up with to like mass edit finding aids in Oxygen or another tool like that, and anything else, to be frank, that that she's come up with that might help people in this last push from July 1st to what are we, August 31st.
Sarah, for the mass editing, what are you using? Is that Xquery or something like that?
So I'm using a editing program kind of like Oxygen. It's called VS Code. I'll write it in chat. It's a free software you can download. It's open source and it's really easy to use. My husband, who is not a coder, but who does work with code daily, this is the coding stuff he uses in IT. So it's a very common system. And it has a setting that allows you to basically do find and replace, but for every single file you have currently open. And you can have at least 200 files open. I haven't tested with more. So as long as you're really good about your find and replace system for it, you can do a lot of the changes immediately. That's really smart. I am working through a document with screenshots kind of detailing how I do that. And hopefully I'll have that available here at the end of the week, or I guess at the beginning of next week now, because it's Friday.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions out there? Sarah, was there any other kind of issues that you noticed when remediating FIDE8s that you think might be beneficial for everyone to hear? I know you mentioned kind of the main ones. Were there any other interesting ones just that people might not have expected?
I mean, yes, as I mentioned, I could probably talk about an hour and a half on all of the interesting changes that I've noticed. One thing that the qual site will sometimes throw you an error saying there is an issue with the creator tag, and it doesn't give you more than that. What it's probably telling you is that you have two different creator tags. I have to find an example that would have multiples, but basically in the origination master tag inside of the archive description section, you can have multiple creators, but they all kind of need to be grouped together, nested all inside the code. If you have multiple instances of the creator code, or like, okay, so it's origination and then creator and then like a person name and then close tag creator, close tag origination. If you have two different creators, then it throws an error that you can have multiple people inside of the creator tag. You just can't have multiple creator tags. Another interesting error that I've noticed is a simple one in control access of you don't have a second control access tag. Some people have all of their control access points listed out in different sections. So like they have the personal names in one section and the subject names in another section. And some finding aids have them all in one big list. And sometimes in the all one big list section, they only have one control access tag and one control access end tag. I don't know exactly why coding wise this needs to happen, but I do know that you need to have two of those. So literally it is control access, all of your access points, and then the end tag for control access and the end tag for the second control access. There's back-end reasoning why that has to happen, but the short version is just make sure there's two of them and you're good. There are others, I am sure, but those are the ones that are more easily describable and less individual institution dependent. every institution kind of has that one thing they're not doing exactly right, but not everyone else does. So it's hard to really define that as an overall issue.
Okay, yeah. So I see we have a question about, another web session showing errors and fixing them. And obviously you can ask those now, and we can do that now. I think we'll still cover EAD, errors as, but kind of in the context of the webinar topic. So subject access and then errors for ArchivesSpace, and then the idea is to also kind of we're collecting errors as we go for documentation that will come out kind of near the end of training to as a helpful guide going forward. But if there's a greater need for another training session on kind of remediating finding aids, we can certainly do that. So if we want to do a second session, we can kind of fit that in and get a little bit more specific. Of course, we can also do that as Amanda mentioned in the chat at the in-person trainings. So there'll be a number of different resources, and then the remaining webinars, we'll certainly talk about them, but they'll be in the context of the topic, subject access and ArchivesSpace. But if you have a specific error now that you've been trying to address, we can try to do that now.
Emily, in the past, like since we're both in Houston, we've gotten together in the physical world and looked at things together. Sometimes your repository and our repository. So if you want to do that here in Houston, you could let me know. It could be sort of a one-on-one thing.
Okay, well, we have about 10 more minutes. If anybody does anybody have any else things that they'd like to discuss or questions they may have? I don't want to let people know. So they mentioned the qual server. I don't know if that's going to continue after the hard launch. Because the administrative side has the component of checking for errors. So if you're using the qual server primarily for remediation, you'll need to kind of move over to the administrative site to do that soon. We don't really have a date. I think if people have enjoyed using it, we can inquire about seeing if we can maintain that. But I think the plan is to kind of decommission that here in the near future. So just be aware if you're using that qual site heavily that may go away, but all the functionality is in the administrative side. I know I think people probably enjoy being able to check everything before they ingest it into the kind of main site, because it just makes you feel good to kind of test things out and kind of correct all your errors and then upload it to the admin site. And, oh, no errors. Look how well I did, but just be aware, if you're using the Pulse site, it probably will go away. It's more than likely.
Just a comment on that. From the Briscoe, interns are the ones that primarily would be checking a lot of the compliance. And for us, it was, do we give interns an account or not, because of the high turnover. So at least for now, we find the call server quite useful.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. And I can if anybody has kind of any other use cases that they have with maybe continuing the qual server, you can send those to my email, and then I'll collect them and send them to Carla, and maybe that might be a possibility. I'm just not sure, you know, if it's easy to maintain both kind of checkers, if one's in the admin site and one's this kind of separate thing. But if you have a use case, just email me just your short details, and then I'll collect those and bring those to Carla. We can see if that's a discussion that can be had.
So kind of going to Emily's point there, where she just hasn't done anything with EAD. Trust me, you're not alone. There are a number of individuals in TARO or repos who've had staff changes or are now just assuming the TARO responsibilities for a previous archivist. So there are a lot of new people who are learning EAD for the first time or dealing with these issues. This remediation practice, at least for me, has been super helpful in just learning more about the coding process and about compliance and these various elements. And so it was kind of like jumping off into the deep end when I started with this, but you do pick it up quite quickly. And if you want to email your buddy and do like a one-on-one kind of Zoom session where they can walk you through a finding aid or two, just to kind of get the feel for it. Because generally with a lot of our finding aids, the same errors appear on a lot of them or all of them at the same time. So once you've learned to fix a certain error, you'll see it again and again, and you'll just get faster at fixing it. So email your buddy if you want to set something like that up. They're standing by waiting to help out in any way that they can. And if there's an error that you just can't figure out, then they'll pass it up to me and Robert, and we'll handle that for you guys. But this is a great learning experience, and it's going to benefit all of us once we get the new site launched. So thank you again for all of the hard work on this project.
It's intimidating, I think, if you haven't worked with it before, because there's, you know, understanding the errors, there's getting your software set up in the first place in order to be able to work with the files correctly. So it really does take a friendly buddy. And so there's a lot in the TARO community. In your case, I'm right here in Houston, and we, you know, and then for other TARO people, you know, we had that slide of buddies that are available. So, and where else are those, James? Are those on the website?
The list of buddies?
Yeah.
I don't think we have them listed on the website.
Okay.
But they are listed here. And we're the Outreach and Education Committee is working on documentation and kind of like a step-by-step guide on how to set up a number of different tools. So we're about to release our one for Oxygen, just like the Oxygen Basics 101, and how to start setting up to code your finding aids. So we'll have those kind of rolling out throughout the summer as well. So, but yes, obviously, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, everyone has been assigned a buddy, so you should have heard from them already. But if you're new or your institution had some changes or you've just forgotten who that was, just send an email to me and I'll reconnect you with your buddy.
speaking of emails, since we just have 3 more minutes, everyone's contact information is here. So please feel free to reach out to any of us concerning remediation or training, especially if you're interested in hosting the in-person training sessions for TARO. You can email Amy Bowman and Amanda Foki. Well, wonderful. Well, that completes the hour. Thank you for all the questions, and thank you to Sarah and Olivia for speaking, and then to Samantha and Robert and all the people in the buddy system who have done a lot of work to kind of coordinate this effort. It's been a pretty big task, and they've done such a wonderful job. And thank you to Amanda and Amy for helping me set up all these trainings. So we'll have the subject and access control subject and control access session in July. So planning for that is underway. So once we have the details for that session, we'll send that out to the TARO listserv. But in the meantime, if you have any questions about training, or maybe there's a potential topic that you think hasn't been addressed yet in kind of the list of trainings, send me an email and we can kind of work on if there's anything necessary to help everyone be ready for TARO 2.0. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful Friday and a good rest of your weekend.